Welcome to Readers of the Lost Art with your presenter, Dr. Paul Anthony Taylor, a recovering academic. And the title of today's talk is In the Jaws of Gothic Surrealism. A psychopath jumps the shark. Well, hi everybody. And to quote the late great Cilla Black, I had a lot of fun doing this, so I hope you enjoy it. You'll see there below me, quite ominously, is what I think I've seen referred to as a phallus with teeth, but it's from the paperback of the original Jaws novel. And it was for those of you who are of a tender young age, it was 1975 film that was quite a hit at the time, about a seaside town that becomes persecuted by this. I shouldn't laugh, but it's the special effects were quite primitive at the time, but it was still very effective. And I'm contrasting it in true surrealist style with this book on the right, Maldoror. And there are several things to say about that. Is one, the Comte de Lautreamont, the author, is a pseudonym. The real name was a guy called Isidore Lucien Ducasse, and he was born in Uruguay, but of French heritage, and he went back to Paris, where he wrote this book and died at the ripe old age of 24, I think it was. And very little is known of him, which I think is great in a way, because it means that you can't, a lot of time hasn't been wasted trying to, analyze to the nth degree his biography. The work stands on its own. But it wasn't well known at the time. 1868, I think it was written 1869. It was published there or thereabouts. Not much was known of it at the time. It sank into obscurity, but the surrealists, Breton and Salvador Dali and others, championed it and saw it as a brilliant work. It's very difficult to try and explain what it's all about, apart from there's an anti-hero and it's like an anti-novel or a prose poem, and it's like me when I've run out of Guinness. He's against God. I think he picks a fight with the devil. He's against humanity. He really is a bear with a sore head. And there are various surreal moments throughout. Guess what? It's a surrealist novel, but it's or prose poem, whatever you want to call it. It's got many vignettes that are just deeply disturbing. Some of them probably too. I don't know. I find horror and darkness funny. So if I just giggled like a little school kid all the way through, I apologize in advance. But I've picked out one vignette where I used the phrase from the title, jumping the shark. I'll explain with reference to that cultural icon, Happy Days, in a second. But jumping the shark happens literally, metaphorically. Lots of stuff going on, but I just thought it was I find it vaguely humorous. The whole, given if you suspend your disbelief, it's a surrealist piece of writing. No shipwrecked people were hurt in the telling of this story, so please don't take it too seriously. But if there's any interest, I'll try and find more vignettes. And what I'm gonna do is tie it in with the artwork of one of my favourite artists, Joseph Mallard William Turner. Turner's work on the sea is just amazing. So there's one particular painting I'm going to link it to. But before I forget, there are Maldoror. If you've got any French knowledge, I can read a bit of French, but my spoken French is beyond atrocious. And also, I have the handicap of originally being from Liverpool, where we are, by nature, genetically, diphthongally challenged. So, for example, if I try and say fur, as in Fair, it's indistinguishable, both to you and to me, but when I try and say FUR. So, if I try and say it's not fair, it's very unclear as to whether that is it's unjust, or you're wearing a fake animal skin coat. So I apologize in advance, but why all this is relevant is in French, Maldoror has various homonyms or homophones, whatever the word is, for similar sounds. So Maldoror Uh, Maldorore is evil or sickness of dawn, and that's a good one. So if you can remember sickness of dawn or evil of dawn, that's a crucial one I want to develop with reference to the Turner painting. Mal Dor D apostrophe OR is bad gold, evil gold. Again, if you can bear that in mind. There's also horreur in French, horror, or HORE, or is dread. So there's lots going on. It's a bit like Keir Starmer. You can make up loads of insults that either rhyme or sound similar to Keir Starmer. And similarly, this is a very productive word. So, without more ado, this was the origins, if you didn't know, of the phrase jumping the shark. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is in common parlance, it means jumping the shark means a TV series or a work of art or a film franchise. They've jumped the shark when it's become silly and they've lost the plot, literally and metaphorically. They've lost control of things. They're just trying too hard. It's also interesting, just if there's any Happy Days fans, because this is where it came from. There was this very banal, just, vaguely humorous series called Happy Days in the 70s in America. And this was season 5, episode 3. And the plot, insofar as there was one, I think my memory's failing me, but Henry Winkler, character of the Fonz, who was cool and never stopped wearing that stupid leather jacket, he had a dare with a daredevil, a local daredevil, and in that compound you can see where those boys are in the water. There's a shark apparently in a cage. So in real life, Henry Winkler, the actor, was a very good water skier apparently. They didn't let him do the jump. That was a stunt artist or stunt man, but they did let him do the rest of it. And the idea is that he jumps over and everyone cheers. I think if Ducasse had written Happy Days, it would have been an amazing episode because he would have fallen in and the shark would have torn him to shreds, but it wouldn't have really been family viewing. But what's interesting is I think the series went on for quite a while after this, and admittedly it got increasingly bizarre. But it's interesting that looking back, this was the moment Happy Days lost the plot, so to speak, when in fact, in reality, it was still very successful for quite a while after this. So it's interesting how we superimpose or we rewrite history from our after the event. Hindsight's a perfect science. But actually, at the time, it wasn't seemed, as it now is, to have been such a disastrous idea of a plot story. But anyway, I just think it's quite funny that there's this jumping the shark, and then the crude pun that you should be able to work out from the title is an undercurrent of Maldoror when, as we'll see in the story, he's looking down at a shipwreck. And I've chosen this as one of the unifying themes of this talk. This is a painting by J.M.W. Turner called The Slave Ships. The slave ship, slavers throwing overboard the dead and dying, typhoon coming on. He didn't really do brief titles, Turner. And this was from 1840. So the idea is typhoon's coming, and in those days you got more, horrendous as it sounds, you got more for lost slaves than dead slaves, I think. If they were lost at sea, it was some insurance scam. So it was actually, if they were sick or dying, it was better, inverted commas, that horrible idea of throwing people overboard and claiming on the insurance. One thing I'd ask you to just, if you concentrate on it, there's something about Turner. I did a previous video about the man with the golden sun, referencing one of Turner's paintings, the Fighting Temeraire, I think it was. But there's something about the setting sun or the rising sun, depending on whether you see that as dawn or dusk. But I'll show you some details from this painting as we go along. But if you could, I think that is a unifying theme. Awful lot going on. You could spend a long time looking at this, so in your own time. Otherwise, this talk will just go on and on. So this, if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see this is a blown-up version. I appreciate it's not a shark. It's like an oversized. Does it look like a carp or something? But I don't think it is. It's obviously not a shark. It's just some. I don't think it's any particular biologically accurate fish. It's more of an image in Turner's febrile imagination. But I think it's not a bad image to have as we read what happens in Maldoror. I said it was Canto 2, Section 13. And I'm unofficially calling it Boy Meets Shark. So here we go. I sought a soul that might resemble mine, and I could not find it. I scanned all the crannies of the earth. My perseverance was useless, yet I could not remain alone. There had to be someone who would approve of my character. There had to be someone with the same ideas as myself. It was morning. The sun in all his magnificence rose on the horizon. And behold, there also appeared before my eyes a young man whose presence made flowers grow as he passed. He approached me and held out his hand. I have come to you, you who seek me. Let us give thanks for this happy day. There you go, happy days. But I replied, go. I did not summon you. I do not need your friendship. So I should have said the first 2 or 3 slides are the introduction to the canto before you get into the shark theme. But also in the subtitle, this idea of a psychopath jumps the shark. In future videos, I'm going to be exploring, because we're doing Blood Meridian in a live stream in a few days' time. So Judge Holden is arguably one of the best portrayals of a psychopath in the whole of literature. And I've done work on Thomas Sars in videos about the notion of madness and the medicalization of insanity. And in future, I want to look at true crime and the way in which diminished responsibility and psychopathy, all these themes. But I think this is this anti-hero Maldoror, he's a stunning example of a psychopath. And I'll also be exploring the difference in future between a sociopath and a psychopath. So a sociopath tends to have more of a traumatic background. So it's the nature versus nurture idea. They've had bad experiences and they tend to be more volatile. The true psychopath, it's a constellation of symptoms, but a true psychopath tends to be much more in control, lacking in empathy or conscience. And to that extent, I think Maldoror is much more about a psychopath than a sociopath. It was evening. Night was beginning to spread the blackness of her veil over nature. A beautiful woman, whom I could scarcely discern, also exerted her bewitching sway upon me and looked at me with compassion. She did not, however, dare speak to me. I said, come closer, that I may discern your features clearly, for at this distance the starlight is not strong enough to illumine them. Then, with modest demeanour, eyes lowered, she crossed the greensward and reached my side. I said as soon as I saw her, I perceive the goodness and justice have dwelt in your heart. We could not live together. Now you are admiring my good looks, which have bowled over more than one woman. I know the feeling. But sooner or later you would regret having consecrated your love to me, for you do not know my soul. Not that I shall be unfaithful to you. She who devotes herself to me with so much abandon and trust, with the same trust and abandon do I devote myself to her. But get this into your head and never forget it. Wolves and lambs look not on one another with gentle eyes. You put that in a Christmas cracker. What then did I need? I who rejected with such disgust what was most beautiful in humanity. I would not have known how to formulate what I needed. I was not yet accustomed to take rigorous stock of my mind's phenomena by means of the methods philosophy recommends. So an awful lot going on there. with my friend Darren F. McGee. Could probably do a few sessions with this guy. I like that. I do like that Chinese cookie quote: "Wolves and lambs do not look on one another with gentle eyes." Very true. But as you can see, it's part of the whole tenor of Maldoror as a work, this constant disassociation from normal societal standards or contact with other people. But now we get to the good bit. This is where boy meets shark. Boy loves shark. Boy settles down with shark. I sat on a rock near the sea. A ship had just put out from shore at full sail. An imperceptible dot had appeared on the horizon and was gradually approaching, growing rapidly, pushed on by the squall. The storm was going to begin its onslaughts, and already the sky was darkening, turning into a blackness almost as hideous as man's heart. The vessel, which was a great warship, had dropped all her anchors to avoid being swept onto the rocks along the coast. The wind whistled furiously from all 4 points of the compass and made mincemeat of the sails. Claps of thunder crashed amid the lightning, but could not outdo the sound of wailing to be heard from the foundationless house, a floating sepulchre. So he set the scene. He's on the rocks above, on the coast, looking down. And I'm going to end with Turner, return to that painting of the slave ship. But this, I'm going to show you just a random collection, just to intersperse and to, give you relief from my drony, Mardy Ringo Starr voice. Various paintings by various artists of shipwrecks. So this is, and most of them are called Shipwreck. This is called Shipwreck from 1772. It's a Claude Joseph Vernet, Vernet, and suitably dramatic. The lurching masses of water had not managed to break the anchor chains, but had dashed open a way into the ship's sides, an enormous breach, for the pumps were quite unable to expel the vast quantities of salt water which smashed foaming over the deck like mountains. The distressed ship fires off her alarm gun, but slowly, majestically founders. He who has not seen a vessel founder amid a hurricane, in intermittent lightning and deepest darkness, while those overboard are overcome by the despair with which you are familiar, knows not life's mischances. Finally, from within the ship, a universal shriek of sheer woe bursts forth, while the sea redoubles its redoubtable attacks. So, talk about Psychopath. He treats human suffering like a fine vintage wine. This is Eugène Le Poitevin, Shipwrecked from 1839. And not sharks, but if you look to the right, as you do, there's a little pack of polar bears come out for dinner. I'm not sure about the accuracy of that. Human strength giving way was the cause of that cry. Each man unfolds himself in the cloak of resignation and puts his fate into God's hands. They huddle at bay like a flock of sheep. The distressed ship fires off her alarm gun, but slowly, majestically founders. All day long they have had the pumps in action, futile efforts. And to cap this gracious spectacle, night has fallen, dense, implacable. Each man tells himself that once in the water he will no longer be able to breathe. For no matter how far back his memory ferrets, he owns no fish as ancestor. Yet he urges himself to hold his breath as long as possible, to prolong his life by 2 or 3 seconds. That is the vengeful irony he aims at death. That's quite poignant, the idea that just if you could prolong your life by 2 or 3 seconds, it's the desperation. And if you notice it, because it's referred often as a prose poem, although it's written in prose, there are poetic elements. So the way in which throughout the piece there's a repetition of slowly, majestically founders is quite a refrain that goes throughout the writing. I like that phrase as well. Each man unfolds himself in the cloak of resignation. The cloak of resignation. This is Francisco de Goya, the famous Spanish painter. Again, The Shipwreck it's called. And this is circa 1793 to 1794. The distressed ship fires off her alarm gun, but slowly, majestically, founders. He is unaware that the vessel, as she sinks, causes a powerful convolution of swell upon swell, that miry mud mingles with the turbid waters, and that a force coming from below, backlash of the tempest raging above, drives the element to violent, jolting motions. Thus, despite his reserve of composure mustered beforehand, the man marked for drowning should, on further reflection, feel glad to prolong his life amid the whirlpools of the abyss by even half a normal breath, for good measure. It will be impossible for him to defy his supreme wish, death. The distressed ship fires off her alarm gun, but slowly, majestically, founders an error. This is a famous painting by Jean-Louis Theodore Géricault, The Raft of the Medusa, 1818 to 19. Which one day I feel a whole video on just this one painting beckoning. She fires no more shots. She does not founder. The cockle shell has been completely engulfed. Oh heaven, how can one live after tasting so many delights? It has just been my lot to witness the death throes of several of my fellow men. Minute by minute I observe the vicissitudes of their last agonies. Heard now above the market din would be the bawling of some old woman driven mad by fear. Now the solitary yelps of a suckling infant, making nautical orders hard to hear. The vessel was too far off for me clearly to distinguish the groans borne on the gale, but by an effort of will I drew nearer to them, and the optical illusion was complete. So a lot of these, the implication is this is part of his febrile imagination, because he couldn't be hearing this, and it's a warship. I'm not sure what a suckling infant and an old woman are doing on it. So his mind really is going into overdrive. Every quarter of an hour or so, whenever a gust of wind stronger than the rest, keening its dismal dirge amid the cries of startled petrels, struck and cracked the ship's length, and increased the moans of those about to be offered up to death by holocaust, I would jab a sharp iron point into my cheek, secretly thinking, they suffer still more. Thus at least I had grounds for comparison. That reminds me, I'm sure there's something like a Russian folk tale where a genie, or the equivalent of whatever they have in Russia, a spirit appears and offers a peasant a wish. I think I'm not sure if he gets 2 or 3 wishes. I've forgotten precisely how it goes, but basically he says he asks for. I think if it's 3 wishes, he asks for loads of gold. Then he says, I'm trying to remember how it works. But basically, he has one eye. The way the wish goes is one eye is taken out, and then he wishes double on his neighbour. So the way of getting his neighbour to be completely blind is he's prepared to lose one eye. So apologies, I've forgotten the precise nature of the folk tale, but that's the gist of it. And there's something about the Russian spirit, 'cause I remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, when they had their version in Russia, they had to stop. They asked the audience option because the audience they found would deliberately give the wrong answer because they didn't want anyone else to win the prize. So I obviously have some Russian in me somewhere. This is again Joseph Mallard, William Turner, and it's called Wreckers, coast of Northumberland, with a steamboat assisting a ship offshore. And that's 1833 to 4. It's a theme I'll be returning to, but amidst the absolute power of the sea and the elements, there's always, well, not always, but an element of some of Turner's paintings is this beatific gold colour, which I will return to towards the end. The Man with the Golden Sun. From the shore I apostrophised them, hurling imprecations and threats at them. It seemed to me that they must have heard me. It seemed that my hatred and my words covering the distance destroyed the laws of acoustics and distinctly reached those ears deafened by the wrathful ocean's roar. It seemed to me that they must have thought of me and vented their vengeance in impotent rage. From time to time I would cast my gaze towards the cities asleep upon terra firma, and seeing no one suspected that a few miles offshore a ship was sinking. With a crown of birds of prey and a pedestal of empty-bellied aquatic giants, I took courage and regained hope. I was now certain of her loss. They could not escape. By way of extra precaution, I had been to fetch my double-barrelled musket, so that were any survivor to try swimming ashore from the rocks, thus escaping imminent death, a bullet in the shoulder would shatter his arm and prevent him from effecting his purpose. If I did say, if you want an example of a psychopath, this is your man. And this is an artist, again, maybe it's something in future to look at, but I'm always caught between, is it kitsch or is it actually brilliant? And I've never quite made my mind up. But this is Ivan Ivazovsky, which is called Wave, from 1889. During the fiercest part of the storm, I saw a forceful head, its hair on end, cleaving the waters with desperate exertions. Tossed about like a cork, it gulped litres of water and sank into the gulf, but soon reappeared, hair streaming, and fixed its gaze on the shore, seeming to defy death. His composure was admirable. A great gory wound caused by the outcrop of some hidden reef scarred his intrepid and noble countenance. He could not have been more than 16, for by the lightning flashes which lit the night, the peach bloom on his upper lip was barely visible. And now he was no more than 200 metres from the cliff, and I could take a good look at him. What courage! What indomitable spirit! How his head's steadiness seemed to taunt destiny, while vigorously ploughing through the waves whose furrows parted intractably before him. This is Eugene Delacroix, Shipwreck off the Coast from 1862. I had resolved beforehand I owed it to myself to keep my promise. The last hour had told for all, none should escape it. That was my resolution. Nothing would change it. There was a sharp report, and the head sank at once to reappear no more. From this murder I did not derive as much pleasure as one might think, and precisely because I was sated with perpetual killing, henceforth I would do it through sheer habit, impossible to abandon, but affording only the scantest climax. So it's chasing the dragon. You'll never have that first flush of enjoyment. You're constantly seeking. I'm not oversharing. This is what I've read about psychopaths, honest. The senses were blunted, calloused. What pleasure could I feel at the death of this human being when there were more than 100 about to present me with the spectacle of their last struggles against the waves once the ship had gone down? With this death I had not even the lure of danger, for human justice, cradled by the hurricane of this frightful night, slumbered in the houses a few steps from me. And this is Alfred Guillou. Adieu, it's called, appropriately, from 1892. Adieu. It's like the ending of the film Titanic, isn't it? When I'll never let you go as she pushes him away. Today, when the years hang heavy on me, I sincerely state for supreme and solemn truth, I was not as cruel as men later related, but sometimes their wickedness wreaks its enduring ravages for years on end. So my fury knew no limit. I was seized with an excess of cruelty, and struck awe in anyone of my own race who might happen to meet my haggard eyes. Were it a horse or dog, I would let it by. Did you hear what I just said? Unfortunately, on the night of the storm, I was seized by one of my fits of wrath. My reason had flown, for as a rule I would be cruel but more discreet, and everything falling into my hands at that time had to perish. I do not intend to justify my misdeeds. Again, a typical psychopathic, not really bothering about any notion of conscience or need to justify your own actions. This is Turner again, just called Shipwreck from 1805. So one of his early ones. The fault is not entirely with my fellow men. I simply state what is, while awaiting the last judgment, which makes me scratch my nape in anticipation. What care I for the last judgment? My reason never deserts me as I claimed, to mislead you. And when I commit a crime, I know what I'm doing, and I would not wish to do otherwise. Standing on the rock while the hurricane lashed at my hair and cloak, I ecstatically watched the full force of the storm hammering away at the ship under a starless sky. In triumphant fettle, I followed all the twists and turns of the drama, from the instant the vessel cast anchors until the moment she was swallowed up within that fatal garment which dragged those whom it clothed like a cloak down into the bowels of the sea. and the full responsibility is taken. When I commit a crime, I know what I'm doing. I do not wish to do otherwise. So one true crime thing I might look at in future is Gary Gilmore, the Executioner's Song by Norman Mailer, who he took complete responsibility and wanted to be executed. But this notion of the medicalization and the way the legal profession does everything within its power not to execute people, even if they want it. I should have put this earlier on when I mentioned The Tempest, because this is Tempest themed from Shakespeare. This is Miranda, it's called. John William Waterhouse, and this one's from 1916. I think he died a year later, so in that sense it's quite poignant. But this is the same artist. In the past I've done a video or two on his Echo and Narcissus painting. That's the art gallery, the Walker Art Gallery in Liverpool, which I've spent many an hour looking at. But the time was approaching when I myself would play a part as actor in these scenes of disordered nature, when the spot where the vessel had battled clearly showed that she had gone to spend the rest of her days, in the stalls of the sea. Some of those who had been borne overboard by the breakers reappeared on the surface. They clung to one another, grappling in twos and threes. This was the way not to save their lives, for their movements were hampered, and they sank like cracked beakers. What is this army of marine monsters swiftly slicing through the waves? And this is the do-do-do, do-do-do, Jaws music. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So back to the slave ship slavers throwing overboard the dead and dying, Typhoon coming on from 1840, J.M.W. Turner. There are 6 of them, with sturdy fins that cut a path through the heaving waves. The sharks soon make merely an eggless omelette of all the human beings who flail their 4 limbs in this unsteady continent and share it out according to the law of the strongest. Blood mingles with the waters, and the waters with blood. Their savage eyes sufficiently illumine the scene of carnage. But what is this new turmoil in the water, yonder on the horizon? A waterspout approaching, perhaps? What strokes? I realise what it is. An enormous female shark is coming to partake of the duck liver pate, to eat the cold boiled beef. She is raging, ravening. A battle ensues between her and the others to contest the few palpitating limbs that here and there bob silently on the surface of the crimson cream. To left and right her jaws slash, dealing mortal wounds, but 3 live sharks surround her still, and she is forced to thrash around in all directions to foil their manoeuvres. So this is the great love of his life, who's appeared on the scene, not just because it's dinner time, but also to kill her fellow creatures, her fellow species. It's coming up for lunchtime here for me, so the duck liver pate and the cold boiled beef doesn't sound too bad. This is a detail. I'm going to show you a series of details now from the Turner painting. It's just like the piranha type fish. It's a feeding frenzy. And it's the way in which you've got the various misshapen fish creatures and the weird bigger one coming in the corner. It looks like almost a flying fish up above at the top of the painting in the pink colour, but then you've got, or is it just the tail of a, it's all, deliberately just a complete turmoil. But then you've got what look like birds as well joining in the fun. So it really is a frenzy of all different species and types of animals. I once went fishing in Canada for wide-mouthed bass, and that reminds me. I was using a lure, and my girlfriend's dad was using real frogs, and the bass were quite cleverly just nibbling the limbs off the frog. With a mounting emotion hitherto unknown to him, the spectator upon the shore follows this new variety of naval engagement. His eyes are fixed on this valiant female shark with her vicious teeth. He hesitates no longer. Musket to shoulder and adroit as ever, he plants his second bullet in the gills of one of the sharks as it shows itself a moment above a wave. 2 sharks remain, displaying even greater tenacity. His mouth full of bile, the man throws himself off the rock summit into the sea and swims toward the pleasantly tinted carpet, gripping the steel knife he always carries. From now on, each shark has one enemy to reckon with. He heads for his weary adversary and, taking his time, buries the sharp blade in its belly. Meanwhile, the mobile fortress easily disposes of her last opponent. Swimmer and female shark he has rescued confront each other. For some minutes they stare warily at one another, each amazed to find such ferocity in the other's stare. They swim, circling, neither losing sight of the other, each thinking, "Till now I was wrong. Here is someone wickeder than I." Then, of one accord, in mutual admiration, they slid toward each other. The female parting the water with her fins, Maldoror smiting the surge with his arms, and held their breaths in deepest reverence, both longing to look for the first time on their living image. 3 meters separated them. Effortlessly, abruptly, they fell upon each other like magnets, and embraced with dignity and recognition in a hug as tender as a brother's or sister's. Carnal desires soon followed this demonstration of affection. A pair of sinewy thighs clung to the monster's viscous skin, close as leeches, and arms and fins entwined about the loved one's body, surrounded it with love, whilst throats and breasts soon fused into a glaucous mass reeking of sea wrack. In the midst of the tempest that continued raging, by lightning's light, the foamy wave their nuptial couch borne on an undertow as in a cradle, they rolled over and over towards the unknown depths of the briny abyss, and came together in a long, chaste, hideous coupling. At last I had found someone who resembled me, From now on, I was no longer alone in life. She had the same ideas as I. I was facing my first love. Well, I think I need to go off and get a cigarette. And I don't even smoke. And this is where I began with the concept of the evil or the sickness of dawn, or Maldoror, evil gold. It's the combination in such an horrific scene of the slave trader ship and the people being thrown overboard. Turner, the way he manages to portray the light. And I think it's some type of metaphor for the way in which the work Maldoror combines even. It's this question of jumping the shark. I think the Comte de Lautreamont, as the pseudonym is, his way of dealing with the excesses, that's what makes it surreal. It's above reality, it's beyond reality. He takes it to the nth degree, and normally jumping the shark means you've gone too far. But he takes going too far and makes it into an aesthetic art form. So jumping the shark becomes an actual carnal act, or at least in his imagination. But I'll always come back to these Turner, either sunsets or sunrises. And if you're ever lucky enough, I've seen a few Turners in the National Gallery in London. If you ever get the chance, there's something just absolutely magical about the way it comes off the canvas that you just can't replicate in any reproduction. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, whether enjoyed is the right word. I am about to go and have my lunch, so it just shows you I must be. I think I've self diagnosed as I'm a sociopath aspiring to be a psychopath. But I just found that that's just one vignette from Maldoror. If there's any interest, I'll do more, but it's an acquired taste, as this lady is about to be as well, by the looks of things. But as I said, I will in future develop more. I see this as part of this particular video as part of the Gothic imagination, but also the true crime, the psychopath versus sociopath, diminished responsibility, all these issues, the myth of mental illness according to Thomas Sars, all these themes. I hope you can see the resonances and relevance and reverberations amongst them all. So until the next time, all the very best. Take care and watch out for those sharks.